A knife kissed my throat in the middle of Ironvale's bright noon, and a cop's breath crawled into my ear like a dare as he whispered, "One push, and you're finished. Nobody will even remember your name." The crowd held its breath. The live stream counters climbed, and I could feel one thin thread of blood run under my collar like a match being struck. Then, in the space of a heartbeat, I turned his own blade, and his scream cut the square open like lightning. My name is Aisha Grant, and I didn't wake up planning to survive a knife. I was walking across the red brick path with a small canvas bag and a grocery list, telling myself to get through one more day without letting Ironvale get inside my head. You know what I mean? Just keep your shoulders level, keep your chin neutral, keep moving. That's the trick in this city. Everyone calls the safest for people like them, with glass towers and fountains and squares full of people who look everywhere except at you, because safety here is performed, not lived, and the performance runs smooth until someone like me walks upright in a place I'm not supposed to. I'd spent a good part of my life learning to keep people alive. Former counterterrorism work close quarters, triage under noise and strobe and panic. I learned how to breathe when others can't, how to see small angles, how to feel the shift of a wrist through a fistful of hair. I carried that training the way some folks carry keys, quiet out of sight, not a banner to wave, just something you keep because you might need it when the world narrows to a point sharper than a truth you can speak out loud. I turned into Ironvale Square because it's faster by 6 minutes. The sun bounced off glass like hot coins, and as I crossed the bricks, I saw 2 uniforms leaning in the shadow of a statue, one red-faced with a jaw like a shovel, the other with that slow grin that says he's already decided you're his afternoon entertainment. Later I learned their names, Doyle and Keene, but in that first minute they were just 2 men in blue making the world smaller around me. Doyle said it loud like he wanted applause. "Don't you love it when they strut like they belong here?" And Keene cut across my path, boots scraping arms wide like a corny magician, and I said the smallest sentence I could. "What do you want from me?" Because sometimes you offer people a sane road so they can choose it. Sometimes you say the kindest thing you can manage and see if it changes anything. And sometimes all it does is give them a clearer edge to press you against. His hand snapped my strap, tore my bag, hit the brick, and burst. My notebook skittered under a bench. My key rang like a tiny bell, and Doyle twisted his boot into the canvas as if he was putting out a cigarette, then leaned so close I could count the coffee stains on his teeth and said, "Neil say you were out of line and maybe you walk out of here." I bent to gather my things, because gathering is what you do while your brain counts exits and angles. But I stood up with my spine intact and said I did nothing wrong, which is not a scream, not a threat, just a fact you set on the table like a glass of water. And that truth is the one these men cannot stand because it doesn't tremble. So he shoved me. I hit the brick, my shoulder first, then my cheek. And when the world snapped back, his knee was on my back, his fist in my hair, his spit on my face, and the sound he made when he popped the knife open was a little too sure to be the first time. You want me to say I was brave, but I was bare, pinned into the heat and dust, tasting copper, counting my breath like coins, hearing 100 phones click alive. He pressed the edge so I felt the future hum. One push, and you're gone. And if you were there, you'd remember how the square went quiet. The way quiet gets before thunder. People making themselves small, telling their hearts not to jump. Here's the thing about fights you don't start. They still ask you to finish them, and the body keeps its own archive angles. It learned the hard way. Tiny adjustments like millimeters that become miles. He tugged my hair, and the angle of his wrist opened by a breath. My right hand found the hilt. My left shoulder rolled. My hips snapped, and the same slice that threatened my throat drove back into the man who promised he owned my story. He howled. He let go. My legs were under me, and the word that came from the crowd wasn't my name. Not yet. It was self-defense, like a verdict arriving before the judge. Sirens raced the truth to the square and lost, then won, then tried to drown it out. Backup poured in, barrels rose like a circle of black eyes, and for a full minute I was a dot in the center of a target. But grief and courage are contagious. A young man with a cap on backward walked in front of the rifles and spread his arms and yelled, "Don't shoot," and didn't shake a woman with a baby on her hip. Stepped out with the kind of stare that makes a man lower his voice, and then you could feel it. The crowd turning into a wall, phones lifted, hands locked, bodies pressed shoulder to shoulder like sandbags against a flood. Tear gas popped and rolled, and it burns. I won't lie. It claws at your throat, but the line-held volunteers wrapped a coat around my shoulders and said, "Walk," when I say walk. and we moved through chaos like a current. And somewhere under the noise, I heard a girl's voice say, "We got it, all of it." And a boy answer, "Post it now." By late afternoon, the city anchors sat in clean studios and tried to sell a neat headline. Extremist woman stabs officer, dramatic music, low B-roll of me standing with a blood stripe and a knife handle, the cut that erases the first half of a story like scissors through a photograph, and the talk shows tutted with that "I'm just asking" tone, but raw clips don't ask, they show. And the kid near the fountain had caught almost everything. The insults, the shove, the knee, the click at my ear. He posted it, disappeared. He posted again. It spread like a fuse, tags stacked up. Stand with Aisha. We saw it. Turn the blade. And strangers in other cities said her name like they'd known me for years, while people in this city whispered be careful into their phones because they know what happens when the footage embarrasses the wrong person. Ask me what hurt more than the knife. I'll say the part where my brother's name started tapping at the inside of my skull like a knuckle on a locked door. Jamal Grant killed in an enforcement op 12 months earlier. No weapon found. No body cam released. Just a neat report that said something happened that didn't. And a press conference where a man in a tie said, "Our thoughts are with the family." As if thoughts were blankets you could throw over a hole in the world. I filed requests. I got back pages redacted into silence. I learned that if you keep knocking, people smile and send you to another door and another until you're tired enough to sit down and forget you came to ask for your own life back. A stranger texted me a cross-streets pair and 2 words, "city basement." And I don't recommend doing what I did. I'm not trying to be a model for your risk, but I was done letting my name be a file number. So I found the old municipal security building, a cinderblock box gone to mold a padlock with more rust than metal, a room where cabinets lay on their sides like tipped headstones, a safe under a tarp that looked like it had been waiting for a person who still had the stomach to open it. And I did with fingers that remembered patterns my head had set aside. Click, and there it was. Special security operation, iron veil, stamped, signed, bland words, hiding blood money trails that ran through shell charities and consulting firms to a fund labeled Community Security, which actually means slush and muscle, and a list of names that slid my stomach cold. The chief, a state aide, 3 captains, a senator's fixer, and in an appendix the line that split me clean. Subject Jamal Grant, deceased in contact, no firearm recovered. That kind of truth doesn't lift you, it drops you, but once I could breathe I wrapped that file in plastic, slid it under my coat, and walked back into a night where helicopters made their own weather over Iron Vale, and the raids began with doors kicked in and lights shoved into people's eyes and a message painted across the city without paint: "We can erase anyone." If you think I'm exaggerating, count the bodies of people who spoke for me. Elijah Brooks, the reporter who said on his feed, "The truth cannot be buried," shot on his own steps in a robbery where nothing was taken. Yeah, that happened. Claudia Hayes, the attorney who said she'd argue my innocence till her voice broke, hit by a truck that materialized out of traffic and vanished into it again. And Officer Daniel Moore, the kind of cop who pulled a mother and kid behind a barricade when the gas rolled too hard, found in a holding cell where the camera had a strange habit of going to sleep. Suicide, they called it. The word went down like glass. The city tried to shut the eye of the storm by telling the rest of you I'd already been swallowed by it at dawn. A crisp announcement. Extremists neutralized a grainy video of a cabin and a fire stretchers with white sheets and no names. And you'd think some people would exhale, but the ones who saw what they saw didn't buy it. I wouldn't either. Then a shaky clip from a ridge above the trees, a figure limping out the back right before the flash, small in the pixels, familiar in the bones. You can argue whether it was me. Maybe it doesn't matter. Maybe the idea of me had already outrun the shape of me. The murals were up everywhere by then, a woman flipping a blade so it reflected the crowd. "Turn the blade" scrawled underneath in letters too messy to be fake. Kids posed in front of them. Grandmothers nodded and kept walking like they were being polite to a ghost. And Iron Vale police scrubbed at the walls at night and woke to fresh paint like rainfall. The State House put on a hearing to pour syrup over broken glass. Oversight Committee reform bullet points on slides, numbers recited in soothing voices, and sometimes the most radical thing you can do is just show up and refuse to speak in their grammar. So I limped in late, bandage peeking from my collar coat still stained where my neck had leaked, and the sound you heard wasn't applause. It was a room forgetting what it thought it knew. I said my name plain. I set down the bag that had survived the square, and I opened the folder like a window. Here is the money. Here are the accounts. Here are the signatures. Here is the memo that uses the phrase, revenue expectations about bodies under boots, and because numbers make some people pretend they need more. Here is audio, a voice saying, "The public doesn't need truth, they need order. If anyone ruins that, erase them, we'll handle the rest." And the hearing didn't gasp like a movie. It leaked air like a tire. Men went pale. One tried to climb back into his face and couldn't, and then the thing happened that truly shifted the ground. I played an unreleased body cam from Doyle, his own lens, his own knife, his own words, my blood, like a thin red underline across my throat. And if you still think context is king, here was the crown made of your bad decisions. His laughter, then his yelp, when a woman he wrote off as nothing turned the world. He thought he had bolted to the floor. When the federal agents walked in, you could feel a different weight in the room. Not the swaggering kind, the paperwork kind, the "this is happening whether you like it or not" kind. Handcuffs don't ring like bells, but microphones pick up the click, and every click said, "The people who wrote the script just lost final cut." Chief Hart sagged as if his suit was welded to a hanger and someone yanked it. Councilman Sloan shouted about defamation, his voice climbing a ladder to nowhere, and in a hallway shot that will never stop being replayed. You could watch badges plink into a tray like coins dropped into a jar marked "too late." Clink, clink, clink. And outside on the steps, a woman held up a photo of a son the city had swallowed, and she cried like the sound could pull him back through stone. Teenagers jumped and cried and laughed at the same time, like their bodies didn't know how to hold that much voltage without sparking. If you want a tidy bow, this is not that story. I didn't stand on those steps and give a speech about healing. I didn't pose with a gavel. I didn't declare victory and tell you everything changes. Starting now, I sat in a small back room with bad lighting and counted the faces. I couldn't bring back Elijah with his pen, Claudia with her metal spine, Daniel with his long quiet, and I told the medics I was okay. Then I told them again because they looked like they wanted to believe it, and I slipped out through a service hallway that smelled like floor wax and cardboard, and I put my hood up and walked into a city where the chant wasn't a chant anymore. It sounded like a heartbeat, steady, stubborn, too human to be engineered. Reforms started. You can look them up. Body cams with real penalties when they go dark. A civilian board with sharp teeth instead of gums. A department disbanded and rebuilt under a charter that says people before property in a font large enough to read from the back row. And it's not enough. It never is on day one. But the difference is, you're watching now. The difference is the next time someone in a uniform reaches for a knife. A kid in a fountain will already be filming a grandmother, will already be stepping forward. A rookie will already be deciding he wants to go home with a conscience. And that choice will sit heavy like a hand on his shoulder. People ask if I'm alive, and I smile because that's a strange thing to ask a person who's talking to you, and maybe you're not asking me. Maybe you're asking whether the part of you that refuses to kneel is still breathing. Maybe that's the better question. Maybe the answer is yes. Maybe it's sometimes, maybe it needs food, water, witnesses. Yeah, that happened. We all need witnesses. If you were hoping I'd let you leave without the hard part, sorry, here it is. Was I wrong to turn that blade when a knife lives on your neck and the law is laughing in your ear? What do you call the angle that keeps you alive? Where does self-defense stop and something else begin? And what should happen to men who pin a woman to the bricks and press steel to her skin while a city looks away? Tell me if you still trust the first version of a story delivered with music and a lower third. Tell me where you were the day you realized that cutting the first half of the footage is the easiest way to manufacture a lie. Tell me what justice looks like, where you live and what it costs and who paid already. If any part of this hit you in the ribs like the truth does when it finally gets a grip, share it so the next person recognizes the shape of the moment before it swallows them. If you want more stories told, the way people actually talk when the microphones aren't around, subscribe and stay with us. And if you were in a square once and saw something you can't forget, or if you've been cut out of a story and want to put yourself back in, drop it in the comments and don't hold back. Tell me what you think was right, what was wrong, what scared you, what made you angry, what gave you hope, and tell me which state you're watching from so I can put a thumbtack in the map in my head and remember that none of us stands alone.